hair all up in these earrings. Okay. Get lots of piercings in your ears, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Next thing you know, all the hair is tangled up all over the place. Side note. I'm not a person who's tatted, okay? I'm not also a person I would consider to be completely pierced up. I'm not. I only have several piercings in both ears. However, several for me, okay? 7 total. Piercings are a lot of work. This has nothing to do with this video, but it's on my brain because and if you know, if you've gone beyond a standard lobe piercing, and again, I'm not edgy, okay? And none of my piercings I actually consider edgy. I'm not edgy in that way. Every now and then, I don't care how old the piercing is, this happens. It's like, this piercing is like, yo, I'm gonna act up. And so I have a piercing that is acting up. She back here. This is a shameless plug. It's not really a shameless plug. Trust me, this company doesn't know I exist. I have been purchasing H2 Ocean salt spray for over 10 years for my piercings. Let me tell you, if you have a piercing, I don't care how old it is, keep that sucker on hand because it clears up issues so fast. I have tried it's a saline spray. I have tried saline sprays from different companies. I tried making my own. H2 Ocean is where it's at. That's my PSA for the day. If they have tattoo care as well, highly, highly recommend. In case that your stuff wants to get out. I don't know why I had to get that off my chest. Today's video is a tag. Not a tag, I'm sorry. Today's video, I just recorded a tag. Today's video is a book haul, as you can see from this appalling stack of books behind me. I actually did not buy books for about 2 months, from July to August. It wasn't intentional, it just happened. And then when I realized that I wasn't buying any, I was like, no, sorry. I didn't buy books from July to September. So it was about 2 months. And then I started acquiring more books in October. It just happened organically. And these, believe it or not, have trickled in more slowly than you would think. 3 of them one was sent to me by a publisher. 2 of them were gifts, early Christmas gifts. And the others, in my defense, one I have already read, one I'm about to start reading, and the others, almost all of these, were in my 2023 reading list. So this is actually a really interesting sneak peek into some of what I'll be reading next year. I'm going to dive right in because there's a lot. One of them is a whole series, so I'm only going to shout out like the first book. Let's do that now. So I will say I am not necessarily one of those people who goes on book buying bans. I get why people do it. I have done it myself in the past. Like I said, it tends to happen organically. Just for some reason, out of nowhere, I just am not in the mood to buy books, so I won't. And then if I see a book that I really want, and I know that I want to read it soon, I'll snag it. I mean, I could be buying other things, right? It's not something that I make a big deal about, though space is becoming, my hair is all over the place. Space is becoming increasingly limited. Oh, darn. Again, I've said this, I think in the other video in which I'm wearing the same sweater that I recorded before this one. My neighbor who lives behind me is blasting the radio outside on large speakers because he is just the most polite neighbor on the block. Sarcasm. Connor. His name's not Connor. That's his alias. That's what I call him. He doesn't know I breathe air. Anyway, I avoid Connor like the plague. Let's go this way. This is okay. I'm just gonna pick up the first 3 because the rest are Game of Thrones. So I got the box set of 5 Game of Thrones. Books 1 through 5, obviously. In the mass market editions, I have read this one before. I've read Game of Thrones. I read A Clash of Kings. I started The Storm of Swords, but that was when I headed into a reading slump, and I just couldn't focus. I have no idea what happened. And actually, when I was reading this one, I was heading into a reading slump, so I don't remember anything about it. I have a fairly decent memory of this one. I don't remember a ton, but I remember the basis of it. I've seen the first season, but I wasn't really too into the show actually, but I did remember liking the first book when I was focused. So my goal is to start reading Game of Thrones again. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. I'm going to reread them. And I have the other two back here, books 4 and 5. I'm just going to go ahead and put these on the floor. So in 2023, I'm going to read a Game of Thrones again, and then at my own leisure, make my way through the rest of this series. I went for the mass market paperback editions because I have small hands, and I find big I find big hardbacks, but also big trademark paperback editions to be cumbersome and fatiguing. So I prefer the mass market paperback editions of some books. I also do this with Outlander. I get the mass market because they're just so much easier for me to hold and carry around. Let's move forward. Blurb Your Enthusiasm by Louise Wilder. This was sent to me by a publisher, K Publicity, who sent it to me. This came my way in October, and I wasn't expecting it. It just showed up at my door, and so Haley, the one who was like, I saw this book and this has your name written all over it. So whenever somebody sends me something, I make an effort to read it. This is a new release. It was released in the latter, I think October. It was released in October of this year, 2022. And so the subtitle is An A to Z of Literary Persuasion. And so I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I get the premise of it, but it's kind of hard to articulate. So the author is a copywriter, and it's basically the premise is how to judge a book by its cover. Through blurbs, quotes in the book, what is selected to highlight the book quote-wise, publishing, she puts in publishing secrets. She even gives some writing tricks. She even goes into some author feuds and stuff like this. So I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate this book into my 2023 reading. I feel like this would be fantastic as an audiobook, but I haven't seen that. I hope it does get released as an audiobook. I would love to dive into it that way. What kind of music is this guy playing now? Sounds like just nonsense. I know, this is how I know I'm getting older. I hear excerpts of what's the new music these days, and I'm like, what is this garbage? Hot garbage. This book this was an early Christmas gift. I would say Commandant's just because I know that this is a German word. Commandant's Girl by Pam Jinoff. I'm actually reading The Diplomat's Wife by the same author, and that is what I do always have a book on rotation that I consider to be a bedside table or a nightstand read. That's the book or the types of books that I will gravitate towards that don't really require annotating. They're not these heavy literary books, but they're engaging kind of page turners, a little bit lighter and easier reads to read at night when maybe I'm tempted to be on my phone. So it forces me off technology for the remainder of the night or whatever while I'm trying to fall asleep, and I can get some reading in. And so I prefer to read historical fiction, lighter, easier historical fiction or easier books during that time. And so I'm actually pretty much for the most part, enjoying The Diplomat's Wife. It's definitely an easy read. It's a fast-paced read just because the writing style is quite simple. Is it the best writing I've ever read? No. If I was her editor, I would critique some things, but it's enjoyable enough for me to keep going and it's getting the purpose done. And so anyway, I was talking about this book, and so somebody sent this to me as an early Christmas gift. A friend sent this to me as an early Christmas gift because this book also ties into The Diplomat's Wife. So this is World War II fiction, and Emma, the main character, is Polish, and she is a part of a group of a Nazi resistance group. And so she's Jewish, and so she ends up, because she's in this resistance group, she actually ends up in a very complicated and really strange relationship with a Nazi official. And things go from there. So she ends up leading a double life because this Nazi official does not know that she's part of the resistance. But she's an insider. So that shall be interesting. I will say, Kristen Hanna, I have read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I hate that book. It is not well written. And every annotation that I made in that book was a grammatical error, maybe save a couple of edits in that book or annotations I made. Kristen Hanna was an attorney. Pam Jinoff is also an attorney, a lawyer. I have noticed a thread with attorneys who end up writing fiction. They tell too much. They just tell too much. Show don't tell. They tell way too much. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that's just how they're wired. Sometimes it's like this info dump. And I'm like, that's not good storytelling. Where is your editor? You can hire me because you need some help. I've noticed that with some attorneys who end up writing historical fiction. Call me. I'll help you out because you're doing too much. This is on 2023, the reading list. Beowulf by Seamus Heaney. Not by Seamus Heaney. This is who's translated it. This is first of all, check out this cover. Look at that shining. I'm feeling it. So I read Beowulf back in high school and loathed. But I want to venture back into Beowulf. And this is the translation that we read in school. And it's considered one of the definitive translations for a good reason. Tolkien has a translation, but Tolkien's translation is not easy. So in order for me to venture back into this, I decided to venture back into one that I was already familiar with. There's another very new, very contemporary translation by, I forgot the young woman's name, but I read an excerpt of it and was ready to throw my phone. I read to escape technology in a lot of ways. I don't want to read #blessed in anything. Stop. That's just not my cup of tea. Anyway, so Beowulf, and also Beowulf is responsible, or lays the premise, that's my hypothesis, for modern day fantasy as we know it. Tolkien was heavily influenced by Beowulf in his own work, so I'm reading this as I start to then venture into reading more fantasy. And also the first chapter of Game of Thrones reminds me of Beowulf for some reason, and I need to make this connection. So that's why I'm reading Beowulf. Elizabeth Jane Howard's The Light Years, which is book number 1 of the Cazalet Chronicles. Is it Cazalet or Cazalet? Either way. This series is really 5 books. This is the first book. This is going to be the next buddy read for me and a friend. I accidentally... I'm fidgeting a lot. I don't know. I'm hungry. I don't know. This is actually going to be a buddy read. Me and my friend are going to start this in December at some time. We may have already started it as of the time of this video because I accidentally ordered 2 copies of this book. And so she's taking the second one off my hands, and we're just going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and read it together. So I just love interwar. So this is really between World War I and World War II. I love interwar, mid-century British family drama in a novel. So that's why I picked this up. And these new editions by Pam Macmillan. And if you were to line up all 5 books together, it creates a scene with the spines. Holler at your girl. All right. Some more 2023 reading. Robin Hobb's The Assassin's Apprentice, book number 1 of the Farseer trilogy. So I will be venturing into the Farseer trilogy next year, and I think that I will be enjoying it. I love a character-driven story, and Robin Hobb is really known for really good characters. So I don't think I'll probably fly through this book in no time. But her other books are like, I'm not kidding, they're massive. But I heard some of them do kind of turn into a slog at some point in certain periods, but the series as a whole is fantastic. So I'm venturing into Robin Hobb next year. What is the Farseer trilogy about? I can't remember. Irrelevant. Let's move forward because I have a lot of books to go through and I just do not have the time to do synopses on each and every one of these. Also on the 2023 reading list, Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend. book 1 of the Neapolitan Quartet. So again, this is another book that will not take me long to get through. This book has been on my radar for a long time. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. So I was like, you know what? Let's stop waiting. Let's do it in 2023. So there's that. I hear great things. We're going to keep it moving. I'm going to stop with the synopses because I don't have time. I don't want this to be a 40-minute video. Another book that I'm reading next year, check out 19 by Claire Louise Bennett, the same author who wrote Pond, though Pond has never appealed to me. This book appeals to me. It's a coming of age story, I believe. And just the way that it's written, people who I know who have liked it, we tend to have very similar reading tastes. Just the way that they describe how it's written and how this person reflects on youth and growing up, from what I gather, sounds like my cup of tea. So there's that. Also, this cover is very similar to the cover, done for Cleopatra and Frankenstein. So this portrait here is done by the same artist, and so they snagged me that way too. They got you, girl, good. All right, this book I have already read. Slaughterhouse-Five. As you can see, it's already annotated. It was a buddy read with me and my friend, and so as of this video, we have finally met up to discuss this book. We read it in October, and before a review goes live, or before I review a book that was a buddy read, I meet up with the person first, and we share thoughts, and then I'll write my review. So this review should be coming, I would say, between January and February. I'll try to get to it, but Slaughterhouse-Five. I'm glad I read it, but was not a favorite classic. It was a strange book. I got a lot out of it, though. But I do think it's worth the read. Yeah. Thoughts. That's pending. This book is heavy. This Silmarillion. I could never say this. The Silmarillion. There we go. The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. This book, man, HarperCollins got you, girl. HarperCollins got you, girl, with this book. This was a book I was not sure if I was ever going to read because I kind of found it a bit intimidating because this is like one giant mythology in a way. That's how I'm going to choose to read it. It's really more of a historical book. It reads more like a mythology or a piece of history than a fantasy or a novel like The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. But I've heard that it is worth the effort. And I've heard people say that if you read The Hobbit, you read The Lord of the Rings, and you love it, this is just going to be really enriching. And then HarperCollins came out with this hardback illustrated edition with Tolkien's own illustrations in it. Look at those sprayed edges. They got you, girl. And so this book was expensive. I'm not going to lie. So I asked for it for Christmas. I had a friend who was like, what do you want for Christmas? I was like, you know what? I would like this book. And so they purchased it early and sent it straight to my house. So I plan to read this book. Oh my goodness. Maybe in 2024, I want to finish rereading the Lord of the Rings trilogy and then dive into this. And what is so perfect about this is that it is the same format that my illustrated editions by HarperCollins of my Lord of the Rings books are. So they just look beautiful lined up next to each other. So I've got The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and this book lined up back here. Right now you can't see it because it's covered by all this, but perfect. I needed it. I was like, this is the edition of this book I'm going to get. And I just love mythology. So I feel like I'm going to get on with this when I do choose to read it. But I think it'll be a book where I have to take my time. I'm going to put this here so it's not getting beat up. Okay. Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This book only got on my radar when there was a specific review on Bookstagram where the person said that it was a gentle read. It was really insightful, but it wasn't super heavy. There was something cozy about it, and but there was still a lot to pull from it. So that, and also another review, Lily King was actually writing, I've never read anything by Lily King, but Lily King was writing a book, a different novel, and then her mother passed away, I think unexpectedly. And then she stopped with that book, and this is what ended up happening, Writers and Lovers. And so, again, then that makes sense because in the back, the synopsis is blindsided by her mother's sudden death, and then ... So, I don't know. I was intrigued, and so I was like, let's give it a go and see how it happens. Next, burping, excuse me. We're almost, this is what's it. So these are my Lord of the Rings here. You can see my gorgeous editions. They were my Christmas gift to myself last year. They were worth the splurge. So I've got Simone de Beauvoir, The Woman Destroyed. This is a collection of 3 short stories by Simone de Beauvoir. I have never read any of her fiction. I'm very familiar with her brand of existential philosophy. You can't really talk about existentialism without talking about Beauvoir. And so I was curious. I was like, let me see what her fiction is like. I have never just done a deep dive even of her nonfiction. When I have studied her form of existentialism, it's been more as a commentary through research versus just sitting down and reading The Second Sex, which would probably make me want to pass out. But I see a lot of young people, and I mean like late teens and very early 20-somethings, I think gravitating toward this book because the cover it looks good on Instagram. Let's be honest, this cover is Instagrammable. But I then see comments on reviews and people, some of them, not all, but many of them saying, I don't know what I just read. Because Simone de Beauvoir can be dense. And if you aren't, I believe that you do kind of have to do some background first, get at least a basic understanding of her existentialist philosophy in the space and time in which she's writing, and her fiction is going to make sense. So I'm a person who is very fascinated by existentialism. I don't consider myself an existentialist. There are some existentialists I think I favor more than others. Simone de Beauvoir is not my favorite existentialist, though she is a pivotal. Do you have today's existentialism without Simone de Beauvoir and her boo thing? Jean-Paul Sartre. My French is horrible. I don't think so. But I think I probably relate more to Camus. But I decided to give this a go because I love existentialist fiction. So there you go. It just so happens to have a funky cover. Miss Joan Didion, Play It As It Lays. I have been curious about this woman for a long time. So it is about time we read some Joan Didion. And so this cover is also really good. And this is actually going to end up being a buddy read between me and a friend. So my friend has read Joan Didion before. It was some of her nonfiction. She was intrigued by it. She enjoyed it and wanted to keep going. So she saw that I was going to be reading this soon, and I'm going to be reading this next year. So this is going to be a buddy read. That was her first novel. So if I'm reading a novel by an author who's new to me, I typically try to go with their first novel and then go from there. Sometimes maybe one of their later novels will appeal to me more, but typically I'll go with their first novel. Speaking of which, I'm going to do both of these together. We've got some Eve Babbitt's, another author that is very Instagrammable, but if you're going to read Joan Didion, I do think that you can play around with Eve Babbitt's because you get 2 different perspectives on LA. And I did watch a review by, who was talking about Eve Babbitt, and he is, I think, one of the most iconic and I think one of the most intelligent booktubers out there. Better Than Food, that's the name of his YouTube, Better Than Food. And he was reviewing Eve Babbitt, and he read an excerpt of her stuff, and I thought it was hilarious. So I was like, let me check this lady out. So she really talks about, that LA life, and she was kind of like an it girl. And she knew all these famous people. So we have Sex and Rage, which is a novel about a housewife who ends up in New York, And that's all I want to know. And then we have a book of short stories, Black Swans. So I'm going to also venture into some Eve Babbitt's next year. And I think it'll be interesting to compare how both Joan Didion and Eve Babbitt's discuss LA. Whereas Eve Babbitt's is kind of on the glamour side of the very Hollywood side of LA, where Joan Didion is more on the realistic side, exposing the grunge of it, the not so pretty side of really any major city, but particularly LA. Let's get contentious. One of my favorite things to do. We have some Ayn Rand. Atlas Shrugged. First and foremost, can we acknowledge how gaudy this cover is? Why does this guy look like a 1980s mobster? This cover is heinous, but this is the best cover that I could find. This is also going to be a buddy read for me and my friend, because this book, people either love it or hate it. And the love or the hate is often very, very politically skewed. Like, it actually lines up with people's political ideologies a lot. So that's why people don't like, a lot of people who don't like Anne tend to, not always, tend to skew a different way politically. And those who love her tend to skew one way politically. I will say that there are people who just don't like her because they just don't like her books. They don't like the way she writes. So because of all of this contention around Miss Anne, me and my friend were like, we're going to discover this for ourselves and let's see how we get on with this. Why does this book have to be so long? This is over 1,000 pages. And the font is not small. Sorry, the font is not large. Ooh, this book is chunky. I mean, dang. I got this book off eBay. It's clearly somebody had this sitting on their shelf for a long time. I did not go mass paperback actually with this one because I wanted more space in the margins to annotate. Anne is one of those authors when I see reviews on her, or if somebody read her and I go in the comments, people are almost livid. And I'm like, it ain't that deep. Calm down. All right, let's go with Homer first. The Iliad by my boy Homer. I'm going to reread the Iliad for the third time. I had to read it twice in school when I was my Greek Civ class and then my Greek and Roman warfare class, when we then had to analyze military tactics. But when you have to read it from that perspective, it's not the most riveting reading. But I need to read it on its own for fun because these are some of my favorite Greek heroes: Odysseus, Achilles, Agamemnon. I need to read this for fun and enjoy it from that perspective. Sorry, my nose is like super itchy. I need to read it for fun and enjoy it from that perspective. So I don't even have my old college edition anymore. I think I probably gave it away out in rage, but I actually have back here somewhere different translation, but this is the translation, Robert Fagel's, that I used in college. So I wanted to go with this version, this edition, this translation. It's just time to read the Iliad for fun. Last but not least, #cliche, Miss Clarissa Spector. I am very excited to read Clarissa Spector in the upcoming year. And so I have her first book, Near to the Wild Heart, and a collection of short stories, journals, her journalistic writings, etc. And this collection by Penguin called Too Much of Life. So Clarissa Spector, I've come to find out, is considered to be one of Brazil's most renowned, not just female writers, but just writers of all time. She is very well loved. She's actually Ukrainian born, but she was Ukrainian born, but raised in Brazil. I believe she was in Brazil since from 2 months onward. And so I have a couple bookish friends who highly recommended her to me. And I have a Brazilian ballet mate who, when I asked her about Clarissa Spector, her face changed. She was like, oh, you're going to read Clarissa Spector. So she's very well loved. And again, Better Than Food, I was watching his review on one of her books. I can't remember what it was. He's done a couple. And he read excerpts of her writing. And even translated from Portuguese to English was just stunning. And I was like, oh, she's my cup of tea. In Too Much of Life, I mean, look how stunning this cover is, this book is, I was just skimming through and just little sentences that my eyes would follow on. The writing is stunning. So this is her first novel. So I decided to start with her first novel, which is, her novels are not thick. And then I'll go into this. Despite the length of this, I've heard this is quite readable. And this one is Near to the Wild Heart. It's her first pub. She wrote this in her early 20s, I believe. So I'm very excited about Miss Clarissa Spector. I'm hype. I have a feeling she's going to become a favorite author. You just know you have that feeling. So yes, that is what I have acquired. Hold on. Let me take this chunker so you can see in the very far corner how all of that fits so nicely next to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. That is what I have acquired. Everything minus a couple of these books will be read in 2023. And that was also this haul was really a sneak peek into my 2023 reading list, because that's also why I purchased a lot of these books, because I knew that I wanted to read them in 2023. A lot of them are not thick books, so I should be able to fly through them pretty quickly. Even Game of Thrones, like, let's be real. This ain't particularly dense literature. It's just, there is something about diving into a fantasy world. Why is it the coziest thing ever? Anyway, I'm going to sign off. It's time for lunch as of the recording of this video. And I will see you in the next one. If you've read any of these books, please let me know if there's anyone in particular that you liked or didn't like. And yeah, please feel to like, subscribe, leave me a comment. And if you would like to, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. And I will see you in the next one.